The Atlanta Hawks have played 5 games, and they are, of course, 3-2 after a 3-game winning streak. And it's time to take stock of how things have gone so far. We'll talk to Glen Willis, friend of the podcast, coming up for part 1 of a 2-part conversation right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1580 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday evening into Friday here in the early part of November. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 right now if your team happens to win. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And also, please, at the top of the podcast, I should always tell you to make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify and Google on the audio side. And we are also on YouTube. And today's show with myself and Glen Willis, good friend of the podcast, talking about the first 5 games of the Hawks season in 2-part form. So this is actually going to be part 1 that we get into right now, talking about the offense, the defense, some scheme takeaways, observations, what it can tell us about the future, and much more. And without any further delay, here's myself and Glen. I am joined once again by my friend Glen Willis of ATL and 29 and the internet. Glen, welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be here. Yeah, been an eventful 5 games in some ways. I guess we've learned something about the team, so look forward to talking through that with you.
You would think we've learned something. I think we have for sure. And we were just talking before we started recording. It's been about a month since you and I talked in this format. You and I talk all the time, so I had to make sure of that. But it's probably a good interval to have another conversation about the preseason even, but also about the first 5 games as you reference. And, you know, after losing the first 2 games, the typical round of panic ensued. And then they won 3 in a row, and now they're going to win the championship. And the truth's somewhere in the middle, most likely, as we'll talk about on this podcast. I want to open it up to you actually first and throw you a curveball and ask you if there is anything that stands out above the rest that we can dive into. And obviously we'll talk about offense, defense, et cetera here, but I wonder, like, if you had to do a biggest takeaway, or maybe two if you want to go to 2 of the first 5 games, what kind of jumps out to you?
I think the thing that they're doing that's most different, that's helping them the most, is the transition offense, right? So last year they were like, lower half of the league in both volume of possessions and points produced and all that, field goal attempts in each game. And I looked at today, and they're top 5 in field goal attempts per game in transition, and then points produced in transition. They're actually number 1 at the end of last night. Playoffs, they were number 1, right?
They still are, number 1.
Yeah. And I think why that's so important is that we've talked this into the ground, right? Their fit in the offensive half court is still kind of tough in some ways, right? Yep. And so now DJ being aggressive and attacking on the catch, and Jalen's connectivity skills is helping them have some options to kind of work through some of the natural challenges that they have. But the more they can get out and run, I think that the more that they are going to be able to kind of manage through, if they have a 8 possession stretch in a game, in a tight game where things are just tough for them on offense, that transition offense is huge. I think it certainly allows them to take the fullest advantage of Jalen's skill set. I think Dejounte's been awesome in transition, and he has a way to kind of slash, in transition. It's the term I think I would use. Clint is, not been the best finisher of these 5 games, and some people act like, well, that's how it's always been. I'm not really worried about him. That's a different. You and I always land on that conversation. But his rim running is still a value. His rim running is very helpful, right? And so is Okongwu's. And so I just think that the number one thing I would point to is transition offense. I think they would be maybe 1-4 if it weren't for what they were doing in transition offense. So that's what I would point out.
It's funny. Glenn cannot see my notes, I promise, but that was at the top of my list of things to bring up on this podcast. So you were reading my mind. And yeah, number 1 in frequency, and they've been very good. I know I think they're 4th in like the raw pace number, which everybody always cites, and that has to do with offense and defense in a lot of ways. But the more accurate one for like offensive fast break and transition stuff is that frequency. Notable for sure. I mean, they've never played this fast. And it is 5 games. And I don't want to say that out every single thing we bring up on this podcast. So just take that from what we're saying it once now. It's a 5-game sample size. It doesn't mean everything on any of these topics. I'll just say that out loud right now. It's 5 games, but they are playing notably faster. And it's something that Quinn certainly wants to do. And he said that they've talked about playing faster. It also plays into their defensive scheme, which I'm sure we'll talk about later on, about like they're being a little bit more aggressive. They're trying to create a little bit more havoc, and that kind of feeds your transition offense as well, in addition to taking it out of the net. And that's something that Quinn always talks about too, like not wanting to take it out of the net, which means getting stops. But part of the reason why is that your offense is going to be more efficient the faster you play, meaning that you want to avoid those dead ball half-court situations if you can help it. It's generally seen as being better to have fewer half-court possessions, which just, intuitively makes sense. Like you want to be playing in transition because your efficiency is way better when you do that. So, that's certainly a really interesting takeaway. I'm not sure exactly what it means yet, but the fact that they're doing it is very much helping. And look, this is through 5 games. They're a top 5 offense in points per possession, both in raw numbers and if you remove garbage time, like cleaning the glass does. Like they're 5th in raw numbers and 3rd at cleaning the glass. And their half court numbers are not as good as that. So that it's kind of a good encapsulation of what we just said. Like they're not that great in the half court so far. They're better than they have been at times, but it's not like they're lighting it up in the half court. They're not in the top 5 in the half court. It's that they're running more, and that is allowing them to score more efficiently, which, as we kind of all talk about, this team has to be awesome on offense. Like that's the way they're built. So however they get there, that's the most important thing, but they're getting there with kind of playing faster.
Yeah. And I think it frames the whole importance around this aggressive defensive scheme that I know we'll kind of dig into here in a little bit. They have to do that well, right? So if they're, that in my mind, they've played 1 complete game so far out of 5. They're 3-2 and they've played 1 complete game, right?
I would agree. Yep.
Right. So that was against Milwaukee, and against Milwaukee, they kind of took control from the very beginning. And I think those of us watching were waiting, like, they have Giannis and Dame, and like we're just waiting on. And then they tried in the 3rd quarter, what the Bucks did, to kind of reassert themselves the way that they always do. But for me, it's like, okay, they're 3-2. Their defense in the first 2 games was disconnected, disjointed, new stuff. Like I wasn't freaking out about that at all, or being worried that that's just where they're going to be all season long. The first half against Minnesota was rough. That was the first time I think they really kind of faced that much size in the front court, or the other team's front court, which was tough. But they have to execute their aggressive scheme well, and I think they also have to know when to pull back a little bit, which they did in the second half against Minnesota. Right, they got out of being so aggressive, and so on the fly kind of adjustments and stuff. But the best version of themselves is going to be when they can play aggressive defensively. That feeds their transition offense. That takes a little pressure off their half court offense. I think that's the formula that's going to serve them best when they can make that happen.
Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and PrizePicks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. And at PrizePicks, you pick 2 to 6 players, choose whether they'll actually have more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You win up to 25 times money on your entries, and PrizePicks is just you against the projected numbers. An entry can be done in 60 seconds or less. That's really fast, and it makes life easy for you. They have frequent discounts and bonuses and offers, including weekly promos like Taco Tuesday and Flex Friday. PrizePicks also has a huge selection of sports and stat types not offered anywhere else. They offer projections on the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, and many more. They're operational in more than 30 states now, plus Canada. PrizePicks is the best place to have action in more than 70% of the country. I've really enjoyed checking out PrizePicks all year long. I'm digging in all the time there during the NFL season, of course, and then also now that the NBA is up and running. And on the whole, the experience of PrizePicks is tremendous. It's easy. It's fun. I highly recommend it at the highest level. And PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA is the place to go, and use promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100 with PrizePicks. One more time, that is PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA when you get there. Check out daily fantasy sports made easy with PrizePicks. Narrowing it down a little bit on the offensive end of the floor, their best attribute so far is their shooting and free throw rate, and that's. But they've really been, you look at the traditional 4 factors, they've been above average in all of them, and that's a good sign in general. When you're offensive rebounding pretty well, getting to the line pretty well, making your shots, and then avoiding turnovers, like their turnover rate is up from where it's been, but that was a staple under Nate especially, that they took care of the ball. And that was one of their pillars. And everybody wants to take care of the ball. I'm not saying otherwise, but they kind of sacrificed some other stuff in order to do that. And that was kind of the game plan they took. So for them to be able to still be, top 10 or 11 in all 4 of those stats is pretty good. I hesitate to even do this. I want to drill down a little bit into the overall scheme stuff with you a little bit here, but I'll open it up to you again, sort of open-ended. In the half court, there's been a lot made of how they're approaching the half court. Of course, Quinn's emphasis on threes, which he always, to his credit, and it's probably not shared as much, he always talks about rim frequency too. You want rim and threes. It's not just threes. That's it's going to get boiled down into more threes, and he wants more threes, but he also wants more rim shots. And by the way, that's happening. The more rim shots is really happening. 3-pointers not so much yet, but how are they getting there? What are you seeing once the game slows down, because it always does on some level? What do you make of kind of what changes you've seen, or what your observations are when they kind of have to slow down and play in the half court?
Yeah, so the rim pressure they've been a little less dependent on the traditional pick and roll, right? And that's where they generated a lot of that. And Quinn believes in more players touching the ball, more distribution, and things like that. And coincidentally, if you take the ball out of Trae's hands and put it in other guys' hands, your turnover rate is going to go up. That's something that you're kind of buying into. You're looking for other benefit to offset, that thing. But that's there. DJ has, really been great generating rim pressure. And, coming into the season, and we heard Quinn last year, even before the season, part of the season he coached last year, he said, media day, I wasn't able to implement anything. We had to kind of work with what they had, I think he kind of adjusted some lineups and some rotation things to kind of, get some kind of different lineups put together and stuff. But coming into the season, I thought, apart from Jalen being elevated, in his role, which has happened, Dejounte would have the biggest change, because he's a guy who likes to catch the ball, take a beat, see how the defense reacts, right, and then go. And we kill Hunter for that, right? And it's funny because I was like, it's a harder change for Hunter, but his usage should not be, in the same ballpark as what Dejounte's is going to be right now. His usage has been higher. He's been good, and he's been quicker, a quicker processor and equation. You still see that, but he had 5 turnovers, last night. So, you still see the ball handling kind of issues kind of pop up now and then, but he's putting himself into bad spots less. That's being Hunter. But DJ attacking on the catch. I thought it would take, if it fully happened, I thought it would take 20 or 25 games for him to get to the point where he was able to overcome the instinct he has to survey and then make a decision and then go. Now, once Dejounte goes, he goes. He's a very aggressive player, and it's different from Hunter. But the rim pressure coming there has been fantastic. Hunter being more decisive and really having a simplified set of options. Hunter doesn't get to kind of just do whatever he wants to do. I forget what game it was. I think it was maybe the Milwaukee game, where he actually caught the ball about 2 full steps inside the 3-point line in the right corner, and he actually dribbled back behind the line. Yeah. I was like, if I had a heart rate tracker on, I don't know what what it would have been in that moment. But it's anecdotal because it's a singular event, but it still suggests things you see suggest this team is trying to manage to those principles. And it's been kind of up and down. It was rough the first 2 games on offense too, but you can see them kind of getting more comfortable with it. We can talk a little bit more about kind of several scheme things, but to me, it's more about role, habits, principles, very different than what they're doing under Nate, and the team starting to kind of get comfortable with them is what I see. And I would put Dejounte at the top of the list on that in terms of who's kind of mastering this a lot earlier than I'd expected.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Dejounte and DeAndre were probably the 2 guys that had the biggest changes potentially in what they like to do. And it's not as simple as mid-range bad. I think that kind of gets the stigma, and that's not what it, especially for Murray. They're going to let him shoot mid-ranges. We saw that the other day. Of course, he made them all, which was very helpful when he went absolutely crazy in that second half. But Murray's still going to have free reign to take mid-range shots. It's that they want him to get deeper into the paint, and they want Hunter to attack the rim more. And as a team, that is the single biggest change statistically in the Hawks profile, other than maybe the tempo that we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast, is their rim frequency. It's not just Murray and Hunter, but they are two of the bigger changes and just getting all the way to the rim versus settling for mid-rangers or even settling for floaters in Dejounte's case. His floater rate's way down and his rim rate's way up. And that's interesting to me because I think you even talked about this with me last year. There are almost quality differences between Dejounte getting to his spot at 8 feet versus like 14 feet. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of just the way he shoots it and just the quality of that look. It's like not a small difference between like a tough 17-footer and a tough 10-footer even. That stuff matters. And instead of all of that, really, he's getting all the way to the rim. The Hawks are in the top 5 of the whole league, according to Clayton Glass, in shots at the rim. That's not a typical Hawks stat. They've been near the bottom of the league in that stat multiple times. So that's a big, big change. Still not enough threes, which Quinn has, I think, said into a microphone multiple times. He still wants more threes. They've been taking more in the last couple of games. Early in the first couple of games were less. You see more and more. But it's really hard to miss if you watch this team closely, like how much they are putting an emphasis on getting to the rim. And even lineups where you wouldn't think they have a ton of space, because that's an argument that we've also made, like especially around Trae, is like if there's not enough space around him, it's hard for him to get all the way to the rim because he's so small, and it's not his fault. It's just what it is. But it's other guys like Jalen helps with that too. Worth noting that Jalen's been very good on the catch and attacking the rim and using his length and burst to get all the way there. Even Bay, like who you think of as a 3-point shooter because he is, but his blue ball game, like he can get to the rim. Like everybody that they play right now, with the way that Hunter and Murray are playing currently, other than maybe Bogey, everybody else gets to the rim at a decent level, at least these first 5 games, which is not a small thing.
Yeah, and it is a little bit unusual too to see a team with this much, rim pressure. 2 smaller guards, right? You usually see the bigger guards that are kind of doing that. The Russell Westbrook and John Wall, those types, from the last 15 years or whatever, and stuff. So that's a little bit unusual. But I mean, having DeAndre really kind of buying into working to the rim, getting to the free throw line, that's very helpful.
How about that?
And yeah, I know. And so, I know that I feel like Hawks fans, and I'm right there with them. Like, with DeAndre, is this stuff going to stick? Right?
I would love to know, Glenn. We'd all love to know at this point.
And that's the beauty of like enjoying the whole season unfolding, and gradually is like we'll get to find out together if that stuff sticks for him. But he's been an incredibly helpful player, so far on offense, which is just. When they've gotten stuck, the ball getting forced out of Trae's hands, he and JC were kind of the guys who just didn't have the natural skills to kind of really punish that. And just the change in habits and change in principles has been kind of shocking. Now, I must say, the league is going to adjust.
Of course.
The league is going to start throwing different things at them, and they're going to have to problem solve as that happens, right? That's going to happen, and they're going to have to problem solve as that happens. But in that sense, they're kind of at this point, the last 2 games, hitting the mark on that. The other interesting thing is, under Nate, it was too often, especially late in close games, 4 guys watching 1 guy attack a mismatch, right? Mm-hmm. And they would say like that was something he believed in, was attacking the mismatch, right?
Very, very much so.
The Minnesota game, I think there were 2 plays that kind of jumped out at me. One was, Dejounte was running a pick and roll with a Kongwu just right of, center court there. And he kicked the ball to Jalen in the corner. And a Kongwu, instead of having Dejounte and Kongwu kind of back out and give Jalen room and have Jalen kind of go one-on-one, the Kongwu started going towards Jalen to set a ball screen down in the corner. And he slipped it, and Jalen hit him with that pass. And that's an example of like just something very different. So Quinn has them doing something useful and getting into a basic kind of operation to keep things flowing and moving instead of having 4 guys watching 1. On the other end of the court, like there was a time where AJ had the ball and on the right wing, just below the right 3-point break, Bay came up to set a screen. The defense started to ice it. Bay slipped it. AJ was setting a screen for Bay. AJ slipped it. Bay hit AJ with the pass, and then Bay refilled kind of the corner, and AJ attacked kind of hit bay, and so that was, again, like, no one's standing still watching one person go there. Like, that was Bay and AJ. Like, in terms of choosing two guys to execute some sort of operation together, that's not statistically going to come up very often, it feels like, right? That they're going to be guys in more supportive roles. But the fact that they executed it perfectly, to me, suggests that this is something that they are really leaning into in terms of game prep and principles and emphasis and things like that. Because, I mean, to see, like, say, Okongwu and Trae, or some combination that you see working together commonly in these operations, would not so surprising. Seeing Bay and AJ execute that tells you, like, okay, the whole team is being kind of is steered towards these basic, simple operations to keep them from getting stuck, one attacking one, four guys watching.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Snap into the action this NFL or NBA season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're a new customer, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150. It's all yours if your team wins. Beyond the awesome and really awesome, I want to emphasize, awesome perks of signing up, FanDuel has everything you're looking for across the sports betting space. That includes point spreads and money lines. They have player props and futures and over-unders and many more. They also have a safe and secure app that covers the entire range of sports that you might enjoy. That includes places like the NFL and football, across the board, college football, MLB, NBA, WNBA, college basketball, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, boxing. It's all there for you at FanDuel, and they have plenty of options involving the Hawks as well, including the entire scope of offerings for Saturday's game against New Orleans. I'm sure they'll have pregame lines and over-unders, as well as player props, and then also after the game starts, they have live betting as well. Now is the best possible time to join up at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check out the official sportsbook partner of Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you absolutely will not want to miss. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. I don't want to get bogged down in the lineup debate with you. That's another. Let's just not.
But
do
it's
that,
so
Glenn.
fun.
It's not. It's not fun at all. So let's not do that. But that also is a reminder that why that thought triggered in my head was this is just a much more versatile offensive team right now, and that's a word that pops in my head. Like after your previous answer, like malleable is another word where like they're not only rotationally, but certainly rotationally, like Quinn is much more willing to get out of what, Nate, I could tell you what Nate was going to do all the time. Maybe not all the time, but you know what I mean? Like barring foul trouble or something, like I kind of knew what was going to happen with rotations or whatever all the time. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But I think Quinn is much more adaptable. And I think that kind of bleeds into the way he coaches offense too. Like, and it's a great example that you just laid out, but it's the whole team. I mean, they're even Trae, like you've seen Trae get off the ball. And that's something that, by the way, I like the principle, but it's so funny how many times you hear Quinn or someone say, get off the ball. Like he pass and get off is like one of the main principles that he has. He wants guys to get off of the ball once they pass, not stand there. He wants movement. And it kind of leads to that. I'm not sure it's more egalitarian, however you want to say that. Like everybody's engaged in the offense. There's not a whole lot of standing around. And yeah, there are always times in the NBA where it's going to feel stagnant. Like that's going to happen in the NBA. It just is. But there is less of that right now. And again, it's 5 games, but I feel like that's also just like kind of a broad principle is that they simply want everybody involved. They want guys to do a little bit more with the ball. Like even someone like Clint, who, all the conversations kind of are the same about Clint, but like Clint has the ball more often than he used to in non-catch and dunk situations, like DHO game, that kind of stuff. Like he's just doing more. Okongwu obviously can do more. Jalen being much more of an on-ball presence and someone who can attack closeouts, all that stuff. Like there's not a whole lot of, I'm not sure what I'm saying. It's not a whole lot of just like stagnation. And maybe it's because of and look, I want to stress, I am still an advocate that like they should run plenty of pick and roll with Trae Young. Trae Young is maybe the best pick and roll operator in the world. They can't not run that, but they can also do other things. And they're kind of, it seems like they're leaning into doing more like, versatile, malleable stuff.
Yeah. And where those simple operations is what I'll call them, like a little ad lib of Okongwu turning from Dejounte and going towards Jalen in the corner, slipping it, giving that pass. Right. So in the past, and it will happen again this season too, at times where they'll look stuck on offense. And I know a lot of times fans are like, they're not running anything. What's usually going on is the defense isn't letting them run what they want to run. Like
Right.
the defense is just totally spun up on all of your main stuff, and they're doing a great job of just not letting you get to it. The shot clock is ticking down, and you've got to go, right? So where in the past that was pretty much always one-on-one, whether it's Trae or Dejounte or whoever kind of getting to a mid-range step back, low efficient shot. Now, just a basic thing like, hey, somebody go move towards Trae with, and threaten the ball screen and read how the defense is kind of setting up to defend that ball screen, slip it or give Trae a passing angle or whatever. And so those little simple things that they do, like it's funny because last year they are in the summer league. It was a better example. They're running kind of split cuts on the weak side. And so I expected coming into the season, we haven't really seen that yet. So I'm wondering So I'm wondering, is that going to come? I don't know. That's something that Quinn really used heavily in Utah. But right now it's that simple operation of turn and do something productive. Go set a screen for someone, go set a ball screen, move away, create a cutting lane. DeAndre's been great cutting in the paint when the defense is overloaded towards the baseline when the ball's down there. And so the thing that I'm seeing that makes me feel most encouraged about the last 4 and 5 minutes of games going well, even when the opposing defense is kind of taking away your primary stuff, is simple operations. Boom, do something simple to kind of give you an option to get defensive movement, force defensive movement, and after that defensive movement, attack it and go. And that's the thing that's been serving them well, keeping them out of trouble. And they're still going to get stuck sometimes because NBA defenses can be very good at that, getting you stuck. Yep. But now they have these little tools, these simple tools that they can use that they weren't using in the past that I think will make a difference for them.
The split cut point makes me think of something else that I wanted to always bring up at some point in the conversation. And it's that, one of the things with the previous regime was that it felt always like Nate was thinking about that night and not much beyond that night. That was I'm not even sure that's a criticism. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. Yep. He was much more like in the moment. The famous "we're not doing development" line comes in. Everybody said all the time, but even beyond the player development side, even just like within a season, team development stuff, he thought about that night as the priority. Which is everyone wants to win every night, obviously, but it almost feels like Quinn. I'm not saying he's like messing around on purpose, but it feels like some of the stuff he's doing is not necessarily geared toward that day. It's like he wants to experiment a little bit more to figure out what's going to work down the line, which is a very typical NBA thing. Like this is not out of the box necessarily. It's just a little bit more different than what it was previously in this same team. But do you get that sense ever? Like it just feels to me like he's trying to do some stuff, or maybe not do some stuff yet, because he's like maybe saving it or want to do one thing at a time and install. And like, look, I know he had one training camp, but that's certainly worthwhile. They've changed a lot of things, but it wasn't like they haven't been together for 5 years. Like I'm sure that Quinn has stuff in his back pocket that he's not put in yet. Does it feel that way to you that it's like almost like he's experimenting is maybe not the right word, but just kind of not necessarily putting it all in that one game? It's like, okay, can we do this later? I want to try it now to maybe do it later on.
Yeah, I'll use a bit of a parallel. So back, a number of years ago before the Bucks hired Bud, right? When they would use Giannis, they'd have like one plan for the first quarter, one plan for second quarter, right? So the first quarter would be ball screens, the second quarter would be working away from the ball. The third quarter, they'd finally bring him onto the ball. So I called it an unpacking of the different things Giannis does. Yeah. Across this Hawks season, I feel like that's what we're in the process of witnessing, is kind of this unpacking of what the offense is fully going to be. And if one has the question, why is it not all there right now? I think the focus is defense. Like, first of all, we heard suggestions around that. We heard commentary around that in the preseason that we're spending most of our time on defense, right? And I think Quinn is trusting, the fortunes of our season are going to be very much determined by how effectively we play defensively, how much our defense feeds our offense. And then when your defense feeds your offense, you get to set your defense more. And it's this kind of reinforcing kind of, circular process that they want. And so I think there is more coming offensively. I think Quinn's instinct is that if he tries to kind of really aggressively tune the defense down to the kind of finer areas of detail and tries to kind of load up the whole kind of offensive plan for the season, it's too much, right? Especially for how short the preseason is these days. And the amount of practice time they do get and don't get, it's just too much. So I get the sense that more is coming offensively in time. And to me, going back to the lineup question, like I think that's one reason, like where Quinn is going to stay kind of married to that starting lineup unless the other team presents so much size at the 4 and the 5 that they need Jalen instead of Bay, right? And so I feel like even like the last 3.5 minutes against the Wizards was atrocious basketball. It was just horrible, right?
It was very gross.
But I felt like, and this is me speculating, I felt like Quinn was like, we need to experience like what it's like when we take the foot off the pedal, right?
Yeah.
When we can't let our habits slip in those situations. That'll come back to bite you if you're not committed to your habits, you're not committed to your principles, even when the game is, you're basically determined. Like, and that's a progression and a maturity that they're still going to have to demonstrate, right? So, I mean, they've started the game well one time out of 5.
Yep.
Right. they've problem solved against Minnesota. They figured it out against Washington. They didn't get there against Charlotte. They didn't get there against the Knicks. But I do get the feeling like there's more coming offensively because it's been a little on the basic side right now. And I think what Quinn really wants to emphasize is when you get stuck, these are the things we do. When you get stuck, these are the things we do. And I think he senses that with this group, that's more valuable than trying to put in like 2 or 3 or 4 other kind of complex sets that you're going to run from the very beginning of the possession. And that's serving them well. And like Jalen's skills, simple operation. Okongwu's skills, simple. The connectivity skills that they have in the 4 and 5, especially with Okongwu and Jalen, really does, fit what he's trying to do with that kind of simple operation. But I do think more is coming.
All right, that is all for part 1 of myself and Glen Willis. We have part 2 coming to you shortly, if not right now, depending on when you listen to this podcast. Please subscribe to the show. Make sure you check out that second part of the conversation for the full depth and breadth of this chat. And please subscribe. Check out Glen's work across the board. Ratings, reviews, always appreciated. And we'll see you all next time.